Welcome to Soul Sisteries. Hey everyone, welcome to Soul Sisteries. We're here today talking with Trisha DiFazio. Oh my goodness, what an amazing woman, what a story, what a journey, and the truth to her soul, the truth to her own inspiration, following through and making it happen. She inspires the heck out of me.
Yeah, for sure. We ask her what is inspiring or what or who are inspiring for her, and I'm just inspired by her story, her professional development and how that has changed over time, but also just her personal development, her spiritual development. I loved that shift in perspective, which was so important to me. A lot of what she said resonated with me. And I do know that we'll have her back because I want to talk to her some more.
Absolutely. And when we get to the point where she's talking about talking to her 13-year-old self and what she would say, oof, man, I felt that to my core. It's resonating in me still. So I want everybody to hear that.
And she spoke about the work she's done for educators, educators of young children with the emotional regulation work. And I'm just thinking, well, shoot, can I just take some of your work and bring it to my students as I teach counselors who work in the school system? I think there's some value there also.
For sure. She's got some great stuff out there, and for sure we'll get it in your hands because I think it's worth sharing, and the more people who know it, the better. So everybody listen in. Trisha DiFazio. Can't wait.
Welcome, everybody, to Soul Sisteries. Here we are today with Trisha DiFazio. Trisha is an award-winning screenwriter and published author. She joined the Writers Guild in 2023 and currently has a TV comedy series in development at Amazon Studios. In 2020, she won the LA LGBT Screenwriting Contest for Best Feature Screenplay. Trisha is a former public school teacher and USC professor. She is passionate about creating inclusive stories that move people. And here we are with Trisha and her pup in the background. Yay!
Hello, that's Winston. He's a Chihuahua pit bull. So if you hear him, it's because he's got a lot of personality.
Awesome, Winston. Good to have Winston joining us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Yay, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for joining us. We're so excited to talk with you and your hope through. The word is perspective, which we love, and we can't wait to hear more about your perspective on perspective and hope. So let's start there. Let's start with you, Trisha, talking to us about why is perspective the hope through word?
Well, first of all, thank you guys so much for having me on. I'm so honored to be here and get this opportunity to chat with you all today. And also learn from you. Donna, I mean, the other day when we were talking, I was like, oh, Donna's got such an amazing story. I'm so happy that they have a podcast because it's like so important, the work that you guys are doing and the conversations that you're having. And so when I was thinking about my hope through, I was like, what word? Because I was like, is it hope through presence? And then I felt like that's great, but is that me? No, I struggle very much with being present, I think, as we all do. And then I was trying to think of what was the best tool that I've picked up on my journey through what was, I had a challenging burnout experience where I got very, very sick for a long time that like brought me into a bunch of different healing modalities. And we know that like you don't come upon a healing modality unless something has really gone off the rails in your life. There are very few people living a comfortable, calm existence who are like, let me try somatic healing. It's usually like the hard thing that sends you on the path. Yeah. But we have such a aversion to the hard thing, right?
Right.
So when this is so super random. I can't believe I'm sharing this story, but I was having like an emotional breakdown the other day in my yard and just started hacking at like all these plants and was like clearing all this overgrowth. And I knew that there were vines in there that had really sharp thorns on them. And I still attacked so aggressively, knowing that there were thorns in there and knowing that I was going to get cut up. But I was like, well, I got to get this done. And I don't have enough time to weed out the thorns. And then I was like, getting like bloodied. And then I had this moment where I'm like, why am I pushing myself through this pain when I could just slow down and take the time and be gentle with these thorns and respect that this plant has thorns for an important reason and that it is completely neutral. This is not, these thorns are not like here to personally attack me. If anything, I am infringing upon their very peaceful existence right now. But the amount of time that I spent out there cutting up my hands and being like, it's the price I have to pay for this removal, it brought me into like, Trisha, the way you're thinking about this is like so unhelpful. You're also, I was like, maybe respect the thorns, maybe be gentle with yourself and with them. And I slowly went through and just started removing all the thorns and having like this beautiful, like, oh, this is what the monks are talking about when they're like gardening with intention and stuff, which was, I got this beautiful lesson in that very sort of mundane daily thing, which is like, oh, my perspective had to shift and it completely changed my experience. And so I now have telling myself, respect the thorns and be gentle with them. And there's been a lot of times, and I'm sure you guys can relate to this, we all can, where maybe we're not even noticing the thorns or this idea that we have to like push through and be productive was like one of those problematic perspectives that I had that has not served me in a lot of ways in my life and led to like a pretty substantial burnout in my early 30s that took me completely out of my life, but eventually put me like back on the course that I should have been on, which is how all these big life events, whether it's like death or loss or illness. And so some of the perspective pieces that I've picked up from that are like, practice the pause, right? When something happens and you're like, amygdala is on fire with emotion, you feel a strong emotional reaction. My perspective now, and it didn't used to be, is like, do not act in that big emotion. You have to give it like, at the very least, give it 90 seconds to move through you, because you're going to fire off a text message or an email that you're probably going to regret. One of my favorite quotes is like, when you act in anger, it usually ends in shame. And if you go back and think of like every time you responded when you were angry, you were embarrassed. And I like kind of did this laundry list of mine. And I was like, yep, 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 yep. Or you misrepresent yourself. Like, you get an email at work and you're like, this person didn't do, and you're like, fire off that email. And now you kind of look like a jerk, but really you were just like,
Yeah.
this hits my injustice bone and it's been there since I was a child. And it's like, that's not even about you. So I think a lot of practicing the pause, which is in our social emotional learning book that my best friend and co-author Allison Rose and I wrote for students, teachers, and parents, where we talk about emotional regulation. Because I think when you look at like all of our, like, what are the skills we most need as human beings versus like, my background as an educator versus what's being taught at school. Why aren't we teaching kids how to handle pain? Why don't we teach kids how to handle, we're all going to lose somebody. None of us are going to make it out of this alive. We're all going to suffer devastatingly painful, the loss of loved ones. We're going to suffer broken hearts. Why aren't we providing the tools for the most essential heart? Like, we know that's coming. I think like the Pythagorean theorem is so important, but I also know that I don't need it when my heart is broken and I'm ripping thorns out of my yard. And so that, I think, is why we've been drawn to do that, the work of social emotional learning, which is like helping kids and adults regulate their emotions and like understand themselves better. So much of like the curriculum is about learning about things outside of ourselves. Why aren't we learning about us?
Yeah.
Right? Like, why am I, what happened in my life that made me think I need to rip up my hands to get this job done?
Yeah.
I want to take every word of what you just said. I'm like imprinting it. Right?
I know. Sorry. The coffee kicked in and it did a silly.
No, it's in our Reiki language. I'm going to shokure the heck out of that.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Good. Yeah. Oh, that's good stuff.
And we have three of us sitting here that are all educators in one way or another. And to just share them my gosh, you brought up the emotional regulation. And that's what I've been saying for years as a social worker and a therapist is, why are we not teaching these in schools? Why are we leaving it to be after the fact, after, somebody collapses, after somebody has the breakdown? Why are we waiting then when we could have been using all these years taking
I
care?
know.
Yeah.
Make it there's this great Pam Leo quote. I think she's a parenting coach, but she says, either we make the investment in like building the connections with our kids, or either we spend the time making the investment in building the connections, or we spend the time dealing with like the results of the disconnection. Either way, we spend the time. So I kind of mangled that. Sorry, Pam Leo, but it's this idea that, and I see this so much. It's like at the end of a school day, you can have 10 people in a room who have a, combined $2 million in student loan debt and 87 advanced degrees, all try to figure out why Tyler hit Joey. But if anybody took the time to realize that Tyler didn't have breakfast that morning, was up very late, has a stepbrother who is constantly hitting him and who doesn't have like the vocabulary language, doesn't know how to ask for help and cannot regulate, and felt like Joey, taking his cell phone, which is more valuable to him than anything in his life, he was completely justified in hitting him. And he doesn't have, and guess what? When he hits someone, they punish him, but they don't give him a replacement behavior, which is to manage this like idea of like, I'm going to threaten, don't hit him or I'm going to hit you, which is how I think a lot of us grew up. We know from the research now, and also our basic intuition, that doesn't work. I always give this example in teacher trainings about, there's something, this is probably a bad word for it, but it's very like seductive to think that you can punish a behavior out, because it does work very quickly. So let's say, for example, the job is to get a rabbit to get into a hole. Maybe it's a state standard. I don't know, but okay, cool. What's the fastest, easiest way to get the rabbit in the hole is I'm going to take a huge stick and I'm going to go rabbit. And that rabbit's going to run in the hole. And guess what? Checks marks the box. But that rabbit hates me, the hole itself, and trembles every time it sees the stick. Versus, cool, now maybe I'll put a couple carrots in that hole. Bribery, that's another good one, right? Hey, rabbit, come over here. And the rabbit's like, sweet, carrots. But now the next time I say, hey, rabbit, can you go over to that hole? That rabbit looks in that hole and goes, where are my carrots? And I go, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. Here are your carrots. And they go, no. See, first time was 5 carrots. Now I need you to double the carrots, because there's no value in this hole. It's just in your this is like when we bribe kids to do well. We're saying studying for the Constitution tense is such drudgery that only this amount of chocolate could get you to that point. Versus what is the most effective, and which takes just a little bit more time, is to show that rabbit, hey, come check out this hole with me. Here's what it's cool for. You can sleep there. You could read there. You can feel safe there. You can hang out there. Oh, you're scared about going there? Well, let's go in it together. See, look, we're in the hole. It's great, right? Now, next time you want to nap or hang out, why don't you give it a shot? And so when I was telling this story in Kentucky to a group of counselors, and I was saying the thing about the stick works, but the stick is scary, these 2 women shared. This one lady said, when I was young, I got hit with a comb, and I've had short hair my whole life, and I don't use a comb. And this other lady said, when I was young, I got hit with a cutting board, and I cut all my children's food on paper plates. I won't use a cutting board. And we all had this moment where we were like, oh,
yeah,
right. So there, sometimes the better way just goes back to like making that investment. It just takes a little bit more time. And there's this like whole contingent of people who are like, we're being so soft on these kids. We're like, buddy, the research is clear, demonstrative love and care.
Right.
Not a big.
That little time. We know you spend that little time here.
Yeah.
Not trying on the back end to fix all sorts of ills and
programming.
All that stuff. And if only we had spent that little time with that love and care up front. Ooh. Yeah.
Exactly right.
True. Again and again and again. We have this proven for ourselves to be true. And
For
yet,
sure.
yeah, that's good stuff, my friend. Thank you for all of that,
Of
for all of
course.
the beautiful sharing and wisdom. I'm going to ruminate on all of that. But so, what I want to know before we go any further is here you are with these thoughts, inspirations, and this lifetime of stuff that you have evolved to and brought about. But what got you here? Like, what is the origin? What put you on the trajectory that brings you where you are today?
Oh, I mean, there's like two answers to that. The first one is I was 29 and I was a teacher in the suburbs of Chicago, teaching in a public school. I was content. I wasn't super happy. My love life was kind of a mess. I came to California for a bachelorette party. I was on the beach in Venice Beach, and my heart did this like, you would be happy here. And I was like, you be quiet. My heart was like, no, really, like I felt so drawn, so pulled. And I was like, you be quiet. My heart's like, no, for real, listen to me. And I'm like, you don't have any money. I'm like, I'm looking down at my chest, like, stop talking to me like that. Like, this is everybody loves the Pacific Coast. Like, this is a pipe dream. And I talked myself out of it because my conditioning was like, you can't live here. It's expensive. We're in a recession. You're a teacher. You're on vacation. Go back home and do your job. So I don't utter a word of it to anybody. I go to a little teacher happy hour, as we do and deserve. And a friend of mine said, hey, there's a psychic medium here. She's doing teacher, we got the teacher discount. And I was like, oh, sweet. I'm here for it. Now, at the time, in my 29th year on the planet, I'm like healthfully skeptical, right? I'll go get my palm read, but usually the thing that kind of separates the charlatans from like who are, I think, legitimate intuitives is when I say, tell me about my love life. And they say, oh, he's tall, dark, and handsome. I'm like, well, is he a woman because I'm a lesbian? And how did you not know that? I'm pretty sure it was in my aura. So I see this woman and she takes one look at me. And this is as she's like going up the stairs to get ready for her stuff. And she goes, ooh, you're going to be fun. And I was like, weird, but also nailed it. So I run up the stairs and I sit down in front of her. And her name's Delphina. And of course it is. And before I'm even like situated in the chair, she goes, this time next year, you're going to be living in Southern California. You know that, don't you? And I was like, oh, get out of my brain, lady. Like, I didn't tell anybody that. I said, that's impossible. She goes, why? And I said, I have no money. I have student loan debts for my master's degree. I'll be paying till I'm 45 years old. And my whole family's here. I have a tenured teaching job. I have a apartment in a lease. I have a car I have to pay for. She's like, okay, hang on. So she's doing her stuff. She goes, I'm getting that these are all going to unplug from you in somehow, some way, and you're going to have a window of opportunity to go. And that's your window. She goes, because she did this thing where she was like, with her hands, like did a measuring thing. You will be happier there. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy. Also, this could just be a self-fulfilling prophecy because like you told me that and now I move. So I was being very skeptical. And then I was like, okay. And then I go, how about my love life, Delphina? And I'm waiting for her to say, his name's John and he's in accounting. And she says, they're telling me if you move, you get the girl. And I was like, I'm moving. Truly, 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 truly. And so, I mean, through a fluke series of events that I will not bore everybody with, that was like my tenure getting reversed, me getting some check for, they'd been garnishing some health insurance money. So I had some money come in. My aunt won like some sort of lottery bingo. She paid off my car. I got out of my lease. I got my tenured head. And it was like the summer was here. And I moved. And then I got here and I'm like, all right, Delphina, where's she at? And she goes, you got to write it down. You got to write down everything you want. You have to believe she exists first. She goes, part of you doesn't think you're going to find what you're looking for. So I write it all down. And then like 3 months later, I meet a teacher at a bar. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I think this is her. And we went on a date and I said, remind me to tell you something in 3 months. And 3 months later, her thing went off. We were still together. And I said, I think I weird scienced you. And I think that like, you're my person. And then 3 years later, when we got married on the top of Big Bear Mountain, who officiated our wedding?
Delphine.
Delphina.
Delphina, the psychic medium. And my mom from Chicago was so mad that I had a psychic officiate my wedding. And it was like, oh my gosh, amazing, amazing. So shout out to Delphina, who's awesome and lives and works in Chicago and has been since then like instrumental in so much of my like spiritual journey. And then a few years after the wedding, not this was probably going on during it, but Donna knows this. I was working as I'd left teaching and was working as a educational sales rep for a company that I really liked. We made really good stuff. But it's a job that doesn't end, and it is a grind, hustle, grind. And I was, you have a goal, and I was determined to like crush my goal, to outer space and back. And I did, but I burned out. I got so ill. I was like having to pull over and like nap in my car. I just was ignoring all the whispers and all the screams of my body. And they truly were. The whisper was like, or like, your hair's falling out, or your nails are brittle for a reason that is probably a vitamin deficiency. And then also like, you fell asleep at the gym again. Like, it's not normal. My wife would be like, you're sleeping on the ab machine. But do you know what kind of a conditioning it takes for you to take your body there and to get on that machine and then and to fall asleep on it? I mean, I had hotels where I would go in and sleep in the lobby when I was on the road. I could tell you between Moreno Valley and Los Angeles, I stopped at the Hampton Inn. I would go sleep by the pool because I couldn't get myself home. I was burnt, so exhausted, but I was just like dragging my body around. And I went to every single doctor, and they, had me tested for everything under the sun. I'm sorry, my dog is barking. And Western medicine could not find out what was wrong with me. I mean, I was like, I'm dying. I think I'm dying. Like, I have no energy. I can't live my life. I'm unable to do my job. I can't even drive. I couldn't go out to a restaurant. I was having like, I couldn't sleep. My digestion, like every single system in me was off, but nobody could tell me what was wrong. And then finally I had called Delphina, and she was like, you're completely burnt out. It's your adrenal gland. It's like adrenal fatigue. It's cortisol. Your hormones are out of whack. It's going to take you a long time to get better because it took you a long time to get this sick. And it really did. It took like years, but that was the beginning of my perspective shift, which is like, how do you fall asleep on a workout equipment and not think you need more rest?
Yeah.
It's this like productivity, and like, in the religion of productivity, and this is especially true, I think, for women, I was like, I have so much to prove. My body was something my brain dragged around and had to do what it was told, or else I was going to get really mad at it. And turns out my body was like, girl, I have whispered, I have yelled, I have screamed, and now I'm going to clothesline you. And it did. I passed out in the middle of the street on a vacation in Scotland and ended up in the emergency room. And that was like the wake up call where I was like, I fainted in public when I was alone, and it was so scary. And that's when I started taking my healing seriously and realized so much of this was how I was treating myself. It was this insane drive to be productive and hit my goals and to make money and all of these things. And I always think of this one quote, which means so much to me now because I never used to do it, which is either choose to make time for your wellness, or you will be forced to make time for your illness.
Yes.
And I spent everything I made getting better, but also getting that sick for that long. And I mean, like probably 4 years, I was like pretty low energy, low everything, was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because to get better, I had to learn a whole different way of being and knowing myself and relating to the world. And in an act of desperation, I went to like a Reiki class, and it was the only thing that made me feel better. And then the wonderful Reiki master was like, you should do Reiki 2, and then you should do Reiki 3. And then I did Reiki 4 with Delphina's wife, Marie, who's a wonderful Reiki master. And that path And then I started raking everybody, right? I was like doing my practicum. So here I was like helping people, which was helping me. I took every class you could imagine, from like meeting your spirit guides to past life regression. Like because I couldn't do anything else but go to this one meditation studio that was down the street, which I was so grateful for. And so ended up in this like master class. And in one of those classes, this amazing woman walks up to me, and I don't know this woman at all. And she goes, "You're real sick, huh?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just really struggling." And she goes, "Let me do your chart." And I'm like, "I don't understand astrology. I'm pretty sure there's 13 constellations now. Like, how does it even work? Didn't it throw it off by one? I'm not sure. I don't get it." And so she does my chart, and she comes back with like 85 pages, this sweet woman. She's like, "Let's go have tea." And she looks at my chart and she goes, "Writer, writer, 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 writer." She goes, "If you're not currently a writer, and I mean a creative writer, that's why you're sick. You're so off your path. You have, and she's going through all the houses, and her name's Anne Slichter. And she too is an awesome writer." And so I was like, "Actually, I have been noodling on this screenplay.
Uh-huh.
I feel like I'm too old to break into this industry, and I can't fetch coffee, and I can't do this stuff." But then I really was like, you know what? I'm going to go for it. I really like it. I really enjoy it. My first script was about like teaching in a school um, in South Central Los Angeles during the day, and then teaching at USC at night, where I had, complete opposite students, right? I had so much trauma and pain. And then I had kids that had like pet tigers and like a McLaren. And it was like ripping my brain apart to go from, South Central to SC. And so my first script was just kind of a story about the confluence of those worlds as experienced through a teacher. And it did pretty well at some festivals. I didn't know what I was doing. So I started taking classes, and that was the beginning of like a 10-year journey of me mostly being the oldest person at UCLA Extension, but trying really hard, trying to make connections, getting out there. I had one, try and get an agent, try and get a manager. And I had one guy meet with me, says, "You have a really good voice, but would you be a writer's assistant? They make like $4 a year." I was like, I'm married. I have responsibilities. I can't come in entry level. Is there another way? And the guy kind of was like looking at me like, "Honey, don't quit your day job." And he said to me, "You would need to have a very rare and accelerated trajectory." And I was like, "Cool. That's what I'm going to have." So I wrote it on like every month of calendar for 10 years. I had rare and accelerated trajectory, because what that meant was I'd have to sell my own show. And to sell your own show is not just, the odds aren't, they're not even getting drafted into the NFL. They're being being like the top 5 draft picks to sell your own show. And I sold my own show last year.
Yeah.
And I saw that guy and I was like, "Do you remember what you said to me? A rare and accelerated trajectory." But yes. And since like I've sold a movie and have like a bunch of other projects, but it all of that to say, all of the hard put me on the path to where I meant to be, but I wouldn't take it back, And I know you guys know what that's like.
Well, and of course, I want to hear about the show and what you've written and the screenplay and the movie. I want to hear about all of it. It feels, and one, you're speaking my language, Trish. So I love hear you talk about the astrology work and the Reiki and all of that. And for me, it's very hopeful. It screams hope. And I think everybody listening to this will probably be sitting here with, jaw open, just kind of, oh my gosh, like, let me soak this in. So as you're kind of sharing hope with others, what gives you hope?
I think the hope, and I struggled with being hopeful. And I was, when I saw like the email, when you were like hope through, I'm like, oof, where is my hope? And then I even was like, had to look up the definition of hope. And I'm like, where do I get this sense of like trust that it's going to be okay? And that's again, why I picked the perspective thing, because once you can kind of shift your mindset from the, woe is me, why is this happening to me, to what did I learn from this? Like truly, if I could like take away that 5 years of me being sick, I wouldn't. It gave me everything that I needed for right now. And even right now, I'm going through a bit of a hard time, but I keep going back to, the trust in, I have to just trust that this is going to work out, because it always has. And it's just a matter of how we look at it. It's not always happening to us. Sometimes it's happening for us,
Yeah.
even if we don't know it.
So what is that thing? Do you think, what accounts for in you that that you know to keep going, that you know that accelerated trajectory is, that you know it and are willing to go forward with it? I know that you've had validation after validation, but like there's something underneath that.
I think the alternative is not helpful. What's the alternative to not trying? To what am I supposed to do? Just sit here? I'm gonna just shut this window because I don't understand leaf blowers. I'm like Kate Blanchett in that way, where she's like, why are we just blowing their leaves from one side to the other? Like, it really makes no sense and we're all crazy. But I think this sense of hope and trust comes from, you're going to find evidence for whatever you think, wherever you look for it. So for example, if my story is nothing ever works out for me, my brain will find evidence of everything that works out for me, and it will literally discard all of the times when people have showed up for me or been there. And I think that mental reframe, and Brene Brown says this so much better than me, is if you're looking for evidence as to why you don't belong, you're going to find it. And guess what? Nobody wants to go to Las Vegas with you or hang out with you because you're being a Debbie Downer. But I had that tendency towards like feeling like, oh, I'm a victim, or if I feel like a fraud, or, all the things that I think are natural and reoccurring kind of universally in a lot of us. But once I stopped looking for the evidence of why it was true and being like, let's look at all the ways that people have showed up for me at the exact perfect time, right? Like selling and writing that script. Like I met the best professor mentor who believed in me. I had the most wonderful women's writing group who all rallied and supported me. The script that was sold was about my best friend and I in college, who had, the most beautiful friendship of ages, and how lucky I was to have that with her, and that this is a story that we can share. So it's about looking for all the things that I've just trained myself to try harder to look for all the things that are working out. Like Donna out of nowhere being like, Trisha, would you be on this podcast? And I needed it. And I've been looking forward to this so much. And I'm like, see, that was like plucked from the ether, and that I chalk that up too, to being like, things are happening for me.
Yeah.
And like things are happening for you all and everybody else who's listening to this. We just have to train our brain.
Amen, sister. Amen. So has there been anyone in your life who modeled this perspective for
No, opposite actually. No offense.
that way, right? Like that, it works just as much that way.
No, I didn't grow up with any of this, really. Actually, that's a lie. I should say I had, and I'm looking at it right now, I had a neighbor, my Aunt Mare, who was significantly older than me by 60 years or something. And she's like of the World War II generation, and she was so you could not rattle her. And when I got older and I was teaching like 8th grade social studies, I used to do like she and my grandma, Grandma Jo and Aunt Mare, I would have my students ask questions like, what would you ask someone who was alive when Martin Luther King was shot, or when the atomic bomb was dropped? And so they would ask the questions, and then I would film Grandma Jo and Aunt Mare saying, here's where I was in downtown Chicago, or the bomb was the scariest thing ever, because we thought that's how life was going to be, that we were going to continue to drop atomic bombs on each other, which thankfully didn't happen. But again, and so they had these beautiful perspectives, having lived through really hard times and being women, and couldn't get a checking account until like couldn't have your own name on your checking account. And my grandma, who raised like 3 girls kind of on her own, and was just, they were made of such tough stuff. And I attribute a lot of that to like their mindsets were, we're lucky to be alive, and we're lucky to live where we live and to have what we have. And it's not about wanting more. It's about being thankful that we have our health, and they both lived to into old age, and we're so lovely. And I even remember my Aunt Mare once sitting in a chair, and she was singing, and I go, "What are you singing?" She goes, "Well, I'm just thinking of all the patriotic songs I can think of because I want to keep my mind sharp." And I thought that that was just like the most amazing thing ever, that she was just like, "I'm going to do some mental training exercises," before we even knew what that was. And I always admired that in them, because I don't even think they were aware of like how emotionally intelligent they both were,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does.
You talked about this kind of shift in perspective that took place, and a lot of things that led up to that shift. What would your, I guess, your adolescent self, your 13-year-old self, say to you today? What would she think? What would she say?
Oh, she was so naughty. Um, I think I would just like to tell her a few things, honestly. Um, which is, it's gonna be okay, but I also, and this quote's been flying around now for a minute, but it is so good, which is that you grow into the person that would have protected you when you were young. And I think we need to be thankful for all of those versions of ourselves. Like, there was a part in my life in my 20s when I was just a very reckless, like fighter, right? Where I was like, I mean, I'm at like a fist fighting and in a really like self-destructive, belligerent kind of way. And I always, in my older age, look back on that and feel like pretty embarrassed that I was so dysregulated. But then I think, listen, my father was a professional boxer. That's there. And also, I've always had, a pretty strong injustice bone. So if I saw something, I didn't say something, I hit something, which is not normal. But I'm working on like honoring that all those parts of me served a purpose, and that in my 20s, the fighting and like the was all tied to this like rejection of myself because I was gay, and I had a very hard time in my kind of community and in just in the time at my school. And I had so much like, I'm going to bring shame upon the house of my family with this. And so there was so much inner turmoil, but also I'm here, and that those versions of me that protected me even when I felt myself so unprotected, I owe them a lot, because they got me through. They got me through it. So it's okay that I fought a bunch and that I was a little out of control, because
Sure.
I learned from those versions of myself.
Yeah,
And now there's going to be a TV show about one of them.
exactly. And imagine if that didn't self wasn't your journey,
Oh my goodness. We'll see. We'll see. Talk
Right.
about synchronicity and hope. Like, if you could go back and tell that version of me, like, this part of your life might be on a TV show, I'd be like, why? This is a mess. Turns out messes are entertaining. Just kidding.
They are, but with that, I mean, it's getting a little redundant, I know, but it's with that hope at that core, right? With that hope, with that possibility, with that awakening, we know that that's there. We know that that's through the through line, and there's this discovery and this expansion that's coming, and it's the necessary place to be. And how gorgeous to share that too, because right, that is how we all connect with one another, and we can vibe with that and understand that and go, oh, okay, me too, me too,
Mm-hmm.
possibilities for me too. That outreach and that vulnerability is just gorgeous. That's what this is all about, right? That we're
For
doing.
sure. And the hope I think we find in each other comes from, and you do this, I think is the purpose of this podcast, is like when you share your story, you give people permission to share theirs. This is also so important for our kids. to see people being vulnerable, talking about having big emotions and like, hey, I'm not proud of how I behaved or what I did when I was dysregulated, but there is hope there. And a lot of times it's in another person who's lived through it sort of with you. My favorite cartoon is of there's like a person with an arrow sticking out of their back, and there's somebody hunched over and they're comforting the person with the arrow in their back. But when you pull back, you see that the person who's comforting the person with the arrow in their back has 100 arrows in their back.
Yeah.
And that's like you all, and you know what I'm saying? And I got this little tattoo recently of an arrow just to like remind me, right? Like that, the thing that you live through, the loss of a child or of a husband or of parents, you are now, whether we like it or not, the most qualified, helpful resource for someone else who will go through it. And because of your existence and your ability to like walk or crawl through the pain will give that person the hope for themselves. Because when things unimaginable like that happen, you think you're all alone in it. And then they meet someone who's like, this happened to me 6 years ago or 5 years ago. And here's, you're there with all your arrows trying to help them with their fresh one. And I think that's beautiful.
It's incredibly beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you are incredibly inspiring, and I hope you know that. And as your story gets out there even more, the inspiration, oof, all around for sure. That's on the way. I know that's coming. And you've talked a little bit about your Aunt Mare, who was inspiring to you, and I love that you had that moment to be able to share about her. Who today in your world offers you inspiration?
Oof, good one. Wow, I'm gonna go with the first person that came to my head, which is that's so funny because I don't give her enough credit ever, is my co-author, Allison Roser, who we've written now 4 SEL books. We just released a series for parents about nurturing a child's wellness. And we did an SEL for parents and adults. And she's like a professional life coach. She's an SEL expert. She's just like the world's greatest human being. And she's so good at the perspective and the reframe. And she reminds me all the time when I have to do hard things. Full disclosure, I have a real slant towards sometimes the sadness of things. I can really kind of disappear into the woods sometimes without even knowing it, as much as I'm, sitting here and telling you guys how amazingly healed and evolved I am. I'm not. I struggle. I go into the forest all the time and sometimes have a hard time coming out. But she is always there to be like, you have what it takes. You can get out of this. And then I'll, call her and be like, I don't know what I'm doing. It's too hard. And she's like, she's the queen of the reframe, and she means it truly and has been so helpful. And I try to be like her of all the people that I know, to emulate, because I think she truly like walks in the light, and it's very obvious to people. She's going to die when she hears this. I would hold all of my validation for her.
Oh, for eternity.
Yeah. Oh man. But yeah, she's my go-to for sure.
Gorgeous.
What, Trish, of course I'm picturing, okay, here you are with your show and, Amazon, and, here you are walking up to accept your Emmy Award or what would be your walk-in song?
Oh, that's so funny. Well, I don't know that this would be my song, but I once saw this music psychic in this little psychic town called Lilydale, New York. And she said, when people walk in, she hears a song. And I said, well, what was my song? And her song, she said, it was I'm Woman, Hear Me Roar, which I thought was funny. So I don't know what the song will be, but I can tell you what I've always dreamed of my speech being, which was I could never understand, first of all, how anybody gets up there and says, oh, I didn't write anything. I really didn't think I was going to win. Dude, you were nominated. Write a speech just on the off chance of the 5 people nominated. You have to get up there. So you don't put us all through the, I don't have a speech, right? Just write the speech. You've been nominated. Do us all a favor. I just think, and I know you have to get up there and thank like everybody on your team that made it happen and all the executives and all that's good and fine and fair. But I'm thinking you have the attention of what can be hundreds of thousands of people. Like I would do something so like hippy dippy and be like, let us all close our eyes and let's all send energy to something or someone and let's just see if it works, right? Like we're all like we like I don't know. I always was like, I would use it as like an energy experiment.
Yes.
And be like, let's all focus on this one thing because we have everybody's like you at home, close your eyes, let's all picture it, and then let's see if it changes. I would do something like that. And then probably get canceled by all the people I didn't thank that did a lot of work.
Mr. Rogers thing, right? It's the Mr.
Yes.
I'll watch the time. My God, gorgeous. And what talk do we all remember? That one we remember.
That's exactly right. You don't remember everybody thinking, but then you got a bunch of agents like, I can't believe she didn't say my name.
Yeah,
Jake.
You've already made a name for yourself by then.
That's right. Get over it.
absolutely. Love that. Okay, so as you go through this journey, my friend, and all of these gorgeous turns in the road and all of this evolution and expansion, there will come a time when you kind of shed the skin and move on to whatever is next for you. How do you hope, or do you have any hope around what your legacy is or how you will be remembered?
Oh, I hope it's just like, I would love there to be that I somehow supported like a large change for children in education. I think is my number one. Obviously care about everybody, but I've always felt called to help kids. And I think there's been a weird shift culturally in the world where we don't like value like what they have to say and how they feel about things. And I just feel like they need more voice and more choice. And I mean, I did like a kid Congress thing once with my students, and this was truly by virtue of me being ignorant to, I did not know how to do my job. The first year I started teaching, I was in English as a second language teacher. I had no teaching credential. I just like spoke Spanish and they threw me in a classroom. And I had a group of third graders and I said, and they were very varying levels of language proficiency. So in retrospect, this was completely out of their like range in terms of like the language demands, but I didn't know. And so we did a model UN and I gave every kid their country, their resources, the size of their military, all the things that they needed, and kind of just said, figure it out. And I had positioned some places had a lot more power than others. And I wanted to see how they could use language. These kids, first of all, in like less than 90 minutes, solved all of the problems, shared all of their resources. Like, we're like, wait, how much does my military cost? But you need it for what? No. And like, I was like, Kid Congress, why don't we have Kid Congress? Kid Congress, and we take some ID, like, just like,
Yeah.
Right? Teen Congress. Like, Congress is full of 90-year-old, mostly white men who've had mostly those perspectives. When I'm not saying we give, little kids the button, but like, let's hear what they have to say, especially in high school and kids in their, young adults. And I always think about that. I was like, they figured everything out because there wasn't so much ego there. And I thought it was beautiful. And they used language even beyond their abilities because they were so motivated by the power they felt they had, because I cared what they thought.
And you went in open with that belief for them, and they took it and ran with it because there's no restriction there. You started with like, well, I didn't know that this was beyond that. Well, it clearly wasn't.
Yeah, I didn't know that I was supposed to not believe more in you. Didn't get that memo, so that worked out.
Sounds like the same belief that Allison has in you.
Yeah, right. Oh man.
Yeah.
I'm not sharing this link with her.
Find her. So I think it's time for us to kind of switch into the rapid fire questions.
Oh man, let me hit my coffee real quick.
Take a gulp.
Okay, I'm scared.
throw some questions at you, and the first thing that comes to mind, go ahead and tell us. So,
Okay.
what color is hope?
I saw yellow, but I don't know.
Sounds good. What does hope sound like?
I think it's like a high vibrational horn section.
Ooh,
I like that. I like that. Perspective is what?
A choice.
Mm.
ooh. Compassion is.
I mean, I was just going to say putting yourself in, like feeling someone else's feelings, like trying to really to care enough to put yourself in their shoes. But that's more empathy, but that's what I thought. Rapid fire is scary, guys.
No. How about the soul? The soul is what?
So much bigger than our body.
Like that.
One of my greatest teachers in life is.
Pain.
Yes, girl.
Mm. The meaning of life is.
Connection.
And hope is.
Springs Eternal, Emily Dickinson. Hey.
Hey,
These
that's it.
were hard, you guys. Those were hard.
You handled yourself well.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
Love it so much. Oh my gosh. I have loved every second of talking.
No, thank you all. Thank you all. I really appreciate it. You're wonderful.
More Trish DiFazio in my life. So for sure, this conversation continues. And
Yes,
together for a cup of coffee or whatever.
absolutely. Thank you so much, friends. I had so much fun.
Oh, thank you. So how can what do you want to say about what you have coming out, how people can find you, how they can follow you?
Oh, I mean,
What do we need to know?
less about me. And if you're a parent or you know a parent and they are looking for some like tips or tricks or little ways to help regulate emotions in their kids, like K through eighth grade, we have Alice and I, the books are out, published by Teacher Creative Materials and Shell Publishing, Free Spirit Publishing. I could probably be getting this wrong, but you can find them on the TCM website or Amazon. You can Google Trisha DiFazio. We also, if you're a teacher, have Social Emotional Learning Starts With Us. I just like people getting access to those books because there's so much wisdom in there, and we worked really hard on them. And then maybe you'll see a TV show, but I don't want to jinx it, so I'm not going to give the name, but you'll know it when you see it.
Yeah, we're seeing it now. I feel it. It's coming.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see you get your Emmy, so I'm already there.
Well, we'll have to figure out our big thought experiment we'll have to brainstorm the way to do that. Awesome.
Absolutely. Trish, thank you.
Well, thank you all. I appreciate it. Take care.
You too. You too.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today on Soul Sisteries.
And thanks for sharing stories with us. We'd love to hear your stories as well and keep the conversation going, absolutely keeping the hope going. So we're really hopeful that you'll connect with our guests as well who have great stories to share. Go ahead and follow them in various social media platforms or live venues, wherever it is that they're performing and sharing what they do.
We would love to have you follow us on all of our social media platforms, subscribe and rate, as that will help us get our message of hope out to others.
Thanks for listening to Soul Sisteries.